Hello world of YouTube, and welcome to the listening log update for June of 2021. We've got another records on the docket. One of the requests I got out of the way. Some stuff that I was really hyped for came out, and some surprises that I was immediately hyped for came out. But before I dive into it, bit of an update on my marathon. For those who missed last week, I announced that I'll be doing a marathon. It was originally going to be next Wednesday, July 14th into July 15th, but instead it's going to be pushed back to Thursday, July 22nd. So remark, or mark for the first time your calendars, July 22nd, starting at 7 a.m., going until 2 a.m. on Friday, July 23rd, 2021. I'll be sitting in this chair, looking at the TV that's right there, talking to the chat on that computer, playing a bunch of portable ports of console games. I might also be updating the list tentatively, but still, I've got a handful of portable games I'll be playing. Just wanted to update you guys on that, because I know that some people may not go back to that video to get the updates. I'll also be making a video next Wednesday talking about it. Just be prepared to hear more news about the marathon I got going on. But let's save that for the marathon. Let's talk about these records now. Australian technical heavy-ass death metal band Portal dropped their latest record, Avow, a follow-up to what is easily one of the strongest records in their career, and one covered on the very first video listening log update, Ion, which was a cacophonous sonic assault that saw them taking their dense sound and just pummeling the listener with a myriad of dense, heavy tunes. And density is not a stranger to Portal sound, but on Ion, they just found a way to channel it so differently from their previous outings that I really enjoyed, and brought forth an even better experience because of it. But on Avow, while I enjoy a lot of what's here, I think that the opener, Catafalque, is an impressive 10-minute crawl that sees them throwing in lots of dense texturing and blast beats at really good times, and they sort of follow that up even better with Manner of Speaking later on in the record. That's another almost 10-minute crawl with an even better harnessing of a longer pace to create this still very dark and sinister edge that I would come to them for and find ways to engage with the listener that aren't quite as cacophonous as Ion, like on the lumbering parts of Bode or Off Foon, or even some of the sinister guitar work seen on I. It feels a little more vintage in sound as far as death metal is considered. I've left Avow feeling far less into it as I was Ion. I liked a lot of what was here, but I felt like there was something missing. It wasn't like Ochre, which was my intro to the band, which just had this lo-fi darkness that sounded like it was found abandoned in a factory and brought to a tape deck. It didn't have the texturing that Vexovoid had, where everything, including the bass and the drums and the guitars, had these pockets within the madness that seemingly just enveloped your brain in a sonic palette all its own. And it's not Ion. It's trying to take the sound palette of Ion, it feels like, but replicate more of their older sounds. And I can appreciate that, and I feel like it definitely, again, comes across in some of those moments, outside of the blast beat driven stuff, but I feel like there's just something missing sonically that really is supposed to grip the listener in a way that's compelling. Gone is that overall sense of sensory overload that this band typically throws my way. And that's not to say all the luster is gone, because like I said, the parts that I talked about in the beginning of the review, I really, really enjoy. On revisits, I still love how just fierce the band pulls it together on a Foon. And again, Manner of Speaking has these moments that it goes through that are really engaging with the listener and warrant a lot of nice just feelings upon revisits. And that sinister edge is still here, but it just doesn't hit the same way. I don't know. I still really like this. I feel like if you enjoy what this band has going on, if you've listened to their other stuff, or even if you like vintage death metal, and you want maybe a good entry point into this incredibly technical, overbearing sonically band, this isn't a bad place to start. It's still got a barrier of entry. If you don't like heavy-ass heavy metal, you're not going to like this. But I will say, given it's coming off the heels of, again, one of the most electrifying releases, Avow leaves me a little underwhelmed. It's still solid in all of its own regard, and it's still got good things inside of it, but leaving this record left me wanting to spin their older stuff more over this, and I'm giving this a 7. It's still got its moments, it's still got tracks that pop, but again, something's missing, and that could be because on the same day as Avow, they dropped another record, Hagbulbia. And while I've seen people say Hagbulbia is supposed to be a companion record to Avow, even on the point that it's supposed to be spun together, almost like Zyreka, the Flaming Lips project that was 4 discs you had to spin at the same time to get the full experience. I don't see how that's the case with Hagbulbia, and even when talking to people about it, I couldn't see how that was the case on paper, because Portal are this band that are all-encompassing sonically. They're overbearingly loud and abrasive and chaotic at points. I was curious as to how 2 records that are meant to be played together by them would sound. I still haven't done it, partially because I've been looking at both records. I just don't see how that's possible. You know, while Avow still feels like it's lacking a little something, Hagbulbia presents a completely different package that I don't think would mesh with the type of chaos that's on Avow, because Hagbulbia is just an onslaught of harsh noise, which isn't foreign to Portal. They've dipped into straight up just harsh noise tracks throughout parts of the discography, but on Hagbulbia, you've got a full-length release of just these noisy ass sounds with their vocalists' particular style of low rumbling vocals with harsh whispers cutting into the noise so, brashly that it just encompasses the listener in a completely different fashion, and one that I think is all the better because of it. This was the experience I wanted out of Avow. Hagbulbia is so fucking great. It's so good. It's so noisy. It's so harsh. It's so dissonant. It's so chaotic. It's so disheartening of an experience. From Stow's vocal stabs with noise that envelops and some harsh percussive stings that I honestly wish were a little more present on the record, create this completely alien experience to someone who is a fan of this band in a way that I welcome with open arms. I'm not against harsh noise records. I'm not against noise records in general. I've listened to, and I don't think I've talked about any noise records on the channel, at least not to this degree, but Hagbulbia is a noise fan's noise record. All of the tracks are long. All of the tracks have very little in the vein of brevity, and it can be a daunting listen for somebody, but as somebody who likes this shit, it takes it so very well. Like I said, Stow's sort of slight percussive elements help enhance the enveloping noise that you're thrusted into, of Strong Cloth's buzzing sounds that fill the soundscape work so very well at just, again, completely pulling the listener into this experience wholeheartedly. Webtoon almost sounds like a Sun track with how it just creeps in and wraps around the listener and holds them tight in this, again, wall of sound in the best way possible. For all of the things this band has done to be very cacophonous, I'm amazed it took this long, at least from the records that I've listened to make a record that's just harsh, abrasive noise, staticky fuzz, sharp, again, sharp high-end waves just swooping in. It's very textured, not in a similar way to like the one of the most recent Sun records. It's very much still a lo-fi tinge, harsh ass experience, but one that still feels so very Portal. You know, for a band that over the last couple of records has done ways to sort of clean up their sound, clean up in very heavy parentheses, created dynamics in their sound that don't sound as lo-fi. This, I feel like, bridges that gap between their modern records and their records that I got into them with, you know. And it creates, again, this experience that I love so very much. I know that this is not a record that a lot of my viewer base is going to listen to, because while I talk about metal music, while I talk about pop music, while I talk about experimental music, I don't talk about shit like this. If you like noise records, listen to Hagbulbia. It's one of the best records I've heard this year. It's getting a 9 out of 10 from me. Avow, I'm giving a 7. But this, I'm giving a fucking 9. It's so good. It's so very good that I hope you listen to it. And if you do, I'd love to know what you think about it in the comments down below. And on the complete opposite side of that spectrum, we've got Bo Burnham's Inside, a comedy special that I wouldn't have talked about in the listening log had it not had a music-only release on streaming platforms. Because, yeah, the musical itself, or the special itself, has a lot of songs that would almost lend it to be a musical type of thing, and it's not technically a live performance, so it could easily have been transposed into an album, and I'm sure that's why he did it. I wouldn't have done it if it weren't on this. Like, I like the special a lot, but I wouldn't have talked about it on the channel had it not been for that, had it not been albumized. The special itself, I think, is really good. I liked a lot of the light play. A lot of light choreography was really good. I think Bo made the most out of his one-man setup that he could have. He made the most out of his room that he could have in a way that hit really close to home. And honestly, before I get into the music itself, I talked to some people about the special, and you know, the special is very depressing when looking at it. And as a fan of Bo and the way he does like meta commentary and stuff, it was very sad as a fan of his to see him, especially by the time All Eyes on Me came out, be in the place that he was in, only to be thrust back into a place that was very vulnerable to him. It sucks. It sucks to see. And while it did have a lot of 2020 Be-like vibes throughout a lot of the special, in a funny way, I also was taken to a headspace that I've already been in intermittently over the last couple of months, in terms of creatively, mentally. It took me more back to like 2015, where I was, I myself was stuck in my house, in my apartment. Sure, I had a job and I walked to work and stuff, but it was a completely different vibe than where I was at even in 2020, where I was inside still a lot because of the world. You know, the world in 2015 felt like it was still spinning, but I was stuck in a place where I was watching it pass. You know, and it felt more that it took me to that headspace, even though that wasn't the spirit of the special, I think, because I also made a lot of content in my apartment at that time. I was trying to daily vlog. It was a bad time of my life, mentally, to be honest with you. But it took me to that time. But the music itself in the special is really great. Sonically, it's got a lot of catchy electronic sounds. You know, a lot of the drum production on here is really punchy and an almost 80s throwback sort of way. The synth work is incredible. The synth work on both Bezos songs is great. The solo on Bezos one is really, really good. The reverb-soaked style on All Eyes on Me and Sexting hits really well. The organ sound on Don't Want to Know, chef's kiss, it's so good. Even the fun, like, goofy stuff, like Unpaid Intern, sounds really well produced. I love the sonic backdrop of FaceTime with My Mom. I love that very almost Jamie XX style dance groove. It makes me want to listen to In Color again. It's so damn good. And even That Funny Feeling, which is a rare moment where Bo picks up a guitar, sounds great. I think it sonically, it all comes together incredibly well. And topically, because it is a comedy record, I feel like it does hit less comedic notes. You know, it's very reflective of the special, the songs that are on the album version. You know, a lot of the songs, while there are tracks that are comedic leaning in nature, where Bo does his meta commentary stuff that normally he doesn't get this personal until like the last song. It lasts through a lot of this special in a way that feels very different from his other comedy specials. You know, tracks like Content that poke fun at him coming back into the world and making content in a very meta sort of way, or tracks that tackle, you know, white savior complexes like on like Comedy or How the World Works feel very comedy song, but done in a really sharply written way. In fact, and it doesn't help that vocally he sounds like it. It does give me very Weird Al vibes in a non-parody sort of way. You know, Anthony's review in his discussion of it talked about how he sounds a lot like Weird Al, and now I can't unhear it, especially on How the World Works, a track that almost feels like a warm-up to him writing for Sesame Street, something that is actually happening. Or even when he does poke fun at 2020 be-like stuff, like on FaceTime with My Mom Tonight, or Sexting, which get really situational and hyper-specific in the writing, come across incredibly well. You know, 30 is a bop. There's a lot of bops on here. It's a very, very catchy set of tracks, too. It's something that makes sense as to why I've been seeing it all over the corners of the internet that I'm on, and what also drove me to want to talk about it on here, because I have been hearing it everywhere, so why not talk about it? But the songs here are really good, for the most part. There's some that I don't like as much. I think White Woman's Instagram was funny the first time I heard it, and I think that, again, it's a really well-composed song, but it's one that I don't revisit as much. I think that Any Day Now is fine, but it's not as good as like Welcome to the Internet with its dark circus-style instrumentation that just gets faster and quirkier, and Bo's lower register really hits in a good way on that track. Or All Eyes on Me, which is easily one of the best songs I've heard this year. I love All Eyes on Me. It's a instant classic. It is what tracks like Can't Handle This and We Think We Know You from his other specials are, only it hits you all the more in the chest, especially when he talks about how this was supposed to be his year to come back, and that didn't happen. And I've been there, I've seen that happen, and it sucks. Or even just the subtle darkness and That Funny Feeling. The writing in that song doesn't feel like a comedy song. It feels like just an observational sort of tragedy in a really smart way. And there's some tracks that I kind of wish went on a little longer, like Shit. Or I kind of wish he did like an extended version of like Unpaid Intern on here. Because I like those songs, but I feel like they could be a little more fleshed out, similarly to like Problematic or White Woman's Instagram. And it's stuff like that that just holds the record back, you know. Sure, it's really good, and like I said, it's easily his tightest batch of songs, his most consistent batch of songs yet, but it's not quite. I feel like he could still do better. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. I know I didn't talk about all the songs. Now, if you guys caught my Nonagon Infinity reflection video last month, you'll know I've been spinning Butterfly 3000 a lot. It kind of was the inspiration for that King Gizzard video. Not because Butterfly 3000 and Nonagon share a lot in common sonically. It's quite the opposite. While the band post-Nonagon and even pre-Nonagon was doing a lot of sonic experimenting, Butterfly 3000 sees them fusing some of the psychedelic influence that they've had in with some heavy synthetic worship that I think comes together more often than not into a harmonious marriage. I really like Butterfly 3000. It's not perfect, but damn if it isn't an incredibly strong showcasing. You know, whether it's the melody work throughout a lot of the synth stuff on the first half of the record, like on Yours or Shanghai or Dreams, how they create this almost Aphex Twin synthetic vibe on Blue Morpho, while how they interpolate the theme from Shanghai back into Interior People, almost kind of alluding to, again, that sort of cyclical style that King Gizzard does incredibly well. I could see people taking an issue with that on Interior People, but I think because they integrate more of their own King Gizzard traditional style instrumentation more so into that track, and it sort of leads into a lot of the back half of the record. It's a great sort of, again, planting and payoff moment on Butterfly 3000 that also weaves into like the weaving of their typical sound into synthetics, like on Black Hot Soup or You Love, a track that I honestly wish the synths popped a little more on in a gratifying fashion, but still is nice to see there. Or on Catching Smoke, you know, or the just the continuing imagery of butterflies that crop up throughout the lyrics. It creates this vibe all its own amongst the King Gizzard discography, but it's one that fully envelops you into that vibe 1000% in a way that I think is gratifying. You know, again, I didn't know what to expect when diving into this record, but sure as fuck wasn't synths, and not synths used like this, especially given synths were all over that one track on the KG record that I really enjoyed. While it does have a lot of that heavy synth style that makes it sort of separate and alienated from parts of the discography, I like how, again, they integrate their sound into it, or they even do stuff like fuck with the tuning of it, like on Catching Smoke. You know, really the one track that I feel like is the biggest sort of overall down point is 2.02 Killer Year. It's a track where it feels like a lot of their ideas sort of just were thrown against the wall as a sort of afterthought. While I brought up issues here and there across certain tracks that I feel like would have been done better had they done this or that, or I can see people taking issue with the recalling of this at a point in a record versus another point. Killer Year is easily the one track where, as a whole, I think it's ultimately super forgettable. You know, do I wish the synthetics were used a little more throughout parts of the back half? Sure. But I do like when they crop up, like I said on You Love, while I think that it needs to crop up a little more, I do like that it's there, and I feel like once the title track sort of washes in and you get warm and you get enveloped into these sort of twinkly, bubbly synths, it feels like the album sort of comes full circle in a really gratifying way. I don't know. I think this record's really great. I think it's a really great listen, and was a big surprise to me as a fan of all the styles at hand, and seeing King Gizzard tackle them. I think they did it incredibly well. Sure, it could have been better, but it could have been a fuck ton worse. If you like overall synthetic psychedelic stuff, you'll probably like at least the first half of this record, because the synths really do shine on a lot of the first half of this record. The hooks on Shanghai and Dreams and Yours are just S-tier hook work. But yeah, this record's great, really worth your time. 8 out of 10 release from these guys. Super excited that they're doing new stuff like this still, and they're still kicking ass at it. Black Midi are back, baby. A band that I had a lot of love for when their debut dropped. If you remember, I thought Schlagenheim was incredible. One of my favorite albums of 2019. One of the few 10s I gave in 2019. And to say that I was hyped for Cavalcade is an understatement. I love what these guys did on their debut. I was excited to see where they would expand their sounds. And now that Cavalcade's here, I can happily say I do really like this thing. They do experiment more, but in ways that gave me familiar feelings of a different experimental band that I really love, that I'll talk about when I get to that point in this review. But I love that this band decided to take some of that math rock style that coded parts of Schlagenheim and channel it more into a progressive style of playing. It's very different for a prog-sounding record, and it's partially because they still retain a lot of their eccentricities that were on Schlagenheim. They just do a really good job here at adapting it into a different style of songwriting and progression. You know, the 1-2 punch of Chondro, Malasia, Patella, and Slow, with its very groove-oriented, jazzy style playing, with stings of horns and solos popping up around, felt like the purest form of that adaptation into prog, but it still retains a lot of what made Black Midi captivating on that debut in a really rewarding way. Yet, after re-spinning it, after truly feeling a lot of the sort of changes that they were experimenting with, especially the progressive ones, I kept mentally going back to 2017 and the debut of the sophomore outing from one of my favorite like space rock, post-rock, experimental bands from Finland, Kyren Earsay, a band that I talk about a lot. I've mentioned them. I've reviewed all of their records, or I've reviewed their last two and put their debut on my albums of the year in 2014. They're a band that continues to integrate space rock and post-rock into various facets, but they also adorned sort of a prog style, and the prog roots from these two projects feel very similar. I got very early King Crimson vibes from Ruination, and on some of those progger-leaning tracks, I also get that sort of influence pulled in. Even in some of the more Black Midi traditionally sounding songs like John L., which just sounds like walking through falling from the height scene in Vertigo, while the singer's just whispering in your ears in his very quirky style. It fits incredibly well, but it reminded me of some super out there moments, like the meltdown in 21st Century Schizoid Man, but channeled into what Black Midi did so well on Schlagenheim. I love how on Hogwash and Balderdash they have a moment like that where the track just sort of melts down and the vocalist's form of, singing or talk singing, his very Jello Biafra David Byrne-ish sound gets to meld with that in a really cool way. I really appreciate the softer moments as well, or the moments where they sort of take a more traditional approach. It really creates an even more of a jarring experience when looking at this record as a whole. Like Marlene Dietrich and Diamond Stuff, even though Diamond Stuff does still have its quirkiness, at its core it's got this sort of acoustic propulsion to it, or this acoustic vibe going on. They felt refreshing in a way that I really appreciated. I think that this record does a lot of good things. I like how in the closer, Ascending Forth, they continue to branch out more and almost take on a Bowie-esque influence, which also crops up, I'd argue, on Marlene Dietrich. The vocalizing and the production feels very vintage Bowie, but Ascending Forth feels like what vintage Bowie would have sounded like if he made Black Star. It's a really cool experience. And I like this record a lot. I think that it's still very compelling. I still think it's a really fun listen. I think that the energetic points really engage with me, at least, and I feel like could engage with a lover of really groove-driven experimental rock. And I don't know if I like it as much as Schlagenheim, but it's still an Aces record to me, and one that I would hold up there for one of the best I've heard this year. And I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. Sure, there's other experimental rock that also adorns prog well, but I think Black Midi put it into their style pretty successfully on here. Rise Against dropped a new record, Nowhere Generation. Rise Against are a band that I think I've talked about on the channel. If not, I've listened to their last couple of records when they've dropped. I thought Wolves was a relatively solid release. It wasn't anything that I would say I kept revisiting, but I feel like it was a decent batch of decently produced songs, and I feel like Nowhere Generation is another listenable record from a band who's stayed in their lane pretty successfully throughout their career. If anything, I'd say that it's a little more listenable than Wolves and kind of sets itself a notch above that record in terms of consistency and quality. The biggest factor in improvement, especially coming from the production, I think that the production on this record makes it fit in a way that works a little better for Rise Against. I hated a lot of the guitar production on Wolves, and I thought it was very flaccid and boring. I like the bass production on here as well, and I feel like the vocalist gets in his pocket in a nice way. I think the one distracting part of the production that sets this record back for me is the drums. The drums aren't always bad, but there's pockets, especially in some of the hooks, where the drums pop in a way that feels a little less in line with their style. It sounds a little too airy and big for a band that tries to keep it rugged and raw, especially with this record. It feels like it's aiming for stratospheres that conflict with the other parts of the band, and I thought it was a little distracting at points. But this record is also saved above Wolves, especially by its songwriting. Sure, some of the hooks on this record don't hit. I think that the writing on Sudden Urge in general I don't like, and I hate the hook of that song. And I don't like Broken Dreams Incorporated all that much either. I think that it's a little clumsy, and they do wordplay type writing on other tracks successfully, but Broken Dreams Incorporated doesn't lend itself to as much morphability as other tracks on the track listing do. But this record nets positive in a lot of good ways. I think the opener, The Numbers, kicks off the record in a really strong fashion with a great throttling punk jam. I think that they continue that politically charged writing that they're typically known for pretty well on pockets of this record, like on Talking to Ourselves, or Monarch especially, which is a super aggressively tinged jam that I think works incredibly well. And I like that they also dip into other realms of songwriting, like environmentalism on Sooner or Later, very effectively, if you ask me. I don't think it's the best song written in that style, Other bands that I like do it a little better, if you ask me. But I'm always an advocate for a positive message, and I feel like it works pretty well on Sooner or Later. And I also like the softer moments as well. You know, I think the title track and Forfeit especially do a good job with their song titles, and that could easily have faltered as much as Broken Dreams Incorporated a lot more gracefully, especially on Forfeit. I think Forfeit is a really heartfelt song that I think hits an incredibly resonant chord. You know, I like this record a decent amount. I think that it's a pretty solid notch in Rise Against discography. It's still not their best record to me, but I'm happy that after Wolves, a record that underwhelmed me by and large, they're coming back with something that has a little more edge in the vein that I appreciate, with songwriting that still hits in a strong way, that gives me some glimpses of their older days in a good fashion. Definitely check it out if you like these guys. If you haven't listened to it, I think that it's pretty solid, and I'd give it like a 7 out of 10.
All that I have left.
Nat finally dropped her debut record, but it wasn't the one any of us were expecting. Nat left at London, internet person, funny lady, makes good songs. I reviewed her first couple of EPs when they dropped on the channel on the listening log. I didn't review Transgender Street Legend Volume 2 because last year I didn't really do much EP spinning. I'm sorry, Nat. But this is a protest for your hearts here. It's a record that she made while in a house. It was like a live-in house recording situation, and it provided her like a different creative space to work and make this record, and it's here, and I really like it. I think it's great. I think it's really, really great. I think that Nat does a good job at creating this vibe that really feels in line with her personality online, but in a very intimate sense at points. I like that she gets bold at points, like on the expansive Pills and Good Advice that has this great electronic drop in it that carries the listener throughout the song. You know, I like that she infuses almost a hyper-pop style on parts of There Is a Place for You Here, and on the title track itself. I really love the harsh production on those tracks. I love the soft ballad on here, the Ballad of Marian Zion-Check. I think that her harmony work on that track and the songwriting is so killer. The smooth groove on Out of My Mind hits in such a good way that gave me similar vibes that some of the bops on Transgender Street Legend Volume 1 hit me with. I love the hook on It Could Be Better. I feel like her voice just hits that pocket so incredibly well. The one track that doesn't hit me in a way that the rest of the record did, in a big way, was Kudzu. I liked Kudzu well enough, but I feel like if I were to pick a song that I'd probably put on skip, it'd be Kudzu. It's a decent track, but I feel like with what a lot of the record has going on, it hits harder in aspects that aren't those. But I do really like this thing. It left me wanting a lot more. I'm really excited for her other record that she's had on the back burner for a while that I put on my anticipated records list. But I feel like as something to put out there as your debut, I feel like this is a pretty bold record. The production is very bold, even in the moments where it's not really adorning that sort of noisier edge. The drums on this thing punch in a really heavy way that I enjoy. I feel like Nat kills it by and large, and I feel like if you enjoy good singer-songwriter music by an artist who has a really good ear for melody, I'd check out This Is a Protest for Your Heart. I think that it's a good record. I think it's a really good record, and it's one that'll definitely end up on my year-end list. I'm just not sure where yet, but I've got it at an 8. I'd sit with that at an 8. I think it's still really good, and I'm really happy with what Nat made, and I think that it comes across pretty, and I think it hits in some really earnest, heartfelt ways that a lot of our other EPs had done as well. Yeah, it's really good. I definitely highly enjoy it.
Couple demos at Madison Square Garden and tell them motherfuckers that Sony I'm not.
Tyler, the Creator, dropped a surprise record, Call Me When You Get Lost. He dropped a single, Lumberjack, that I really loved. It's all Tyler rapping again. He was sampling Gravediggers on the beat, and he was seemingly getting really he was feeling himself a lot on that track in a really good way, and it immediately got me hyped for this project. You know, for all the love I threw Igor, you guys know, if you saw my Tyler review, I like Flower Boy a little more, because I like that it fused his rapping in with some of those melody-driven styles that he was exploring on his release, a couple of his releases before that, but a lot more holistically, and I feel like it came together really well. And I was excited at the prospect of that in a new record with Call Me When You Get Lost. And what I didn't expect to get was not only that, but even more lush, beautiful, whimsical production juxtaposed against DJ drama giving us 2000s mixtape flashbacks in the best way possible. I think that this record is incredible. You know, I love how heartfelt Tyler feels when he's exploring both the good and the bad things he has to talk about and reflect on this record. You know, whether it's him expressing joy for his wealth that he's in right now, like on Sir Baudelaire, or on Lumberjack, or even just on Blessed, where he's just talking about his successes in a really bright way over this pretty-ass instrumental. Or when he's talking about this relationship that keeps cropping up throughout the album. I almost called it a mixtape. Throughout the album, with this woman that seemingly already has a lover, and he's in this sort of tumultuous relationship with this person. Like on What's Your Name, or Sweet I Thought You Wanted to Dance, or on the super expansive and detail-oriented Wilshire, which gets really into the pocket of their whole relationship as a whole over this lush, fat, vintage-sounding instrumental. I also like how traveling throughout those tracks and on Corso lends itself to the cover art and the overall aesthetic that Tyler's aiming for on here, with this sort of whimsical traveling throughout Europe. You know, I also like how he speaks on issues that he has been called out on, as far as like not addressing race relations in a way that feels so very Tyler, like on Manifesto with Domo Genesis, which feels like a contemporarization of early OF vibes, not just because Domo's there, but the lo-fi edge on there sticks out from the rest of the record in a really positive way. I also like how he spins that into reflecting on his own career as an entertainer and Massa. You know, I think that this record hits a lot of really good notes. You know, and again, the production across the board, whether it's getting lo-fi and gritty, like on Lumberjack, or Vintage and Lemonhead with some ruggedness in there, or on Juggernaut. The beat on Juggernaut's really fucking dope, adding spices of variety amidst the very pretty flute woodwind-filled instrumentals. I don't know, this project just feels like a really whole experience. You know, it's got good hooks. While the first half kind of flies through because it's got that mixtape feel, I feel like it creates this really great experience. No track overstays its welcome, and it leaves room for the beefier tracks to really tell you what they want to tell you without feeling like they're taking up too much of your time. I don't know, I think this record's really great. I think it's well paced, and I think it's easily one of Tyler's best. I think that it does everything Flower Boy did well, while adding a lot of even more of the emotional gravitas seen on Igor, while still expanding in some fun ways. I think this is another great notch in Tyler's belt. I'm giving it a 9. I think that the production is great. I think that Tyler gets in the cut in a really satisfying way. And I dig it. I dig it a lot. A lot more than I thought I would, even though I was really hyped for it. I dig it. You know, I originally thought that the first leg of the record flew by too fast, but even when respinning it for this, like, everything hits in a really good way. You know, I think that he has some really fun surprises in there, like Lil Wayne on a beat like from Hot Wind Blows. It works so very well in a way that part of me initially wasn't think was going to work when I first heard it. Every revisit of this just gave me a lot of joy, a lot of funness, a lot of joy, a lot of good vibes, and I'm happy for Tyler. I truly, truly am. This did what I wish Cherry Bomb would have done when Cherry Bomb was a thing, which is something he addresses. Cherry Bomb sounding why it does. It's great. It's just great. It's a great record. For Tyler fans, I feel like you'll enjoy it. Modest Mouse dropped the follow-up to Stranger to Ourselves, a record that I didn't see getting a follow-up, if only because it was their first record in ages and it wasn't met with all that great a reception by and large. And while the cover art to the Golden Casket is an eyesore, gives me real Oxy Melody vibes in a bad way. The record itself is actually, I feel like, a step above Stranger to Ourselves. There's no tracks on the Golden Casket that I feel like outright suck, which I think is great. You know, I even like how on this record they do weird in a good way. Like, I dig the sounds on Fuck Your Acid Trip, Never Fuck a Spider on the Fly. While I think it gets a little monotonous, I dig the soundscape of Wooden Soldiers as well. And I dig that they're not losing sight of some of their catchier songwriting styles, like on some of the components that did work on Strangers to Ourselves, like on the single We Are Between. I think that has a great hook that I think comes across incredibly well. And I think Transmitting, Receiving, and Leave a Light On also have some nice, more catchier driven aspects to their sounds as well. I dig this record a decent amount. I think that it's pretty solid. I think there's parts that are a little boring, and that's kind of this record's biggest sin, is that while there are parts that excite, the closer Back to the Middle as well has this great meltdown in the end. There's some tracks that I just think don't warrant that many re-listens. I already talked about Wooden Soldiers kind of going on for a little too long. I feel like the minimal sound on Lace Your Shoes doesn't do a whole lot for me. And while I like Walking and Running as well for its sort of jittery, throttling sound, it doesn't hit me quite as much as some other aspects of their career. But it still nets positive for me as a whole, this record. I think that it gives me glimpses of some of the weird stuff from their older side, but even those elements and some of the more accessible points make this feel more in line with like a Flaming Lips project. Not in a bad way. I actually like what the guys do with these open soundscapes in a satisfying manner, but I definitely feel like while they are experimenting with quirky things, not all of them hit in the way that I think the band was hoping, but it's still solid. And I feel like if you enjoy Modest Mouse as a whole, you'll walk away from this project digging at least aspects of it. And I do, which is why it's sitting at a 6 for me. You know, it's not awful. It's not awful by any stretch of the imagination. It's got some good moments, and it's got some moments that really remind me of old Modest Mouse in a good way, but it's certainly not their strongest effort still. I like it a little less than We Were Dead Before the Ship Even Sank, but I appreciate that they're taking more risks on here. And the last record I checked out this month is one that I've been incredibly excited for because it's a jazz record that's a follow-up to a record that not only got me into this band in question, but another band in the jazz scene in Britain that I really love. But I'm excited to see what Sons of Kemet have to say when following up their celebration of black excellence. That was my introduction to them. Your Queen is a Reptile on Black to the Future. And while I like that there are aspects where they present more of what I loved from Your Queen is a Reptile, I also like that they are expanding on and adding things that I feel like give some of the concepts they want to explore a little more upfrontness, or at least a little more boldness, if I were to say so. They're also experimenting in ways that expand on ideas from Your Queen is a Reptile in so many different facets. You know, yes, there are still great, fast, percussive jazz cuts, like on Pick Up Your Burning Cross, or the run from In Remembrance of Those Fallen throughout the Madness Stay Strong, that I really enjoy. The band just gets in this pocket, and their horns and saxes and tubas and drums all just get their own pockets. They have some really great solo work, and it has this production style that is very similar to Your Queen is a Reptile, and having this very, warm feeling that it gives the listener if you like that sort of stuff. But I like that a lot of the experiments they do, I feel like, pay off for them incredibly well, with some things that happen within them that kind of show that they could do more with the setup that they have. But I'll get to those. I'll get to the negatives in a minute. The positives out of the expansions I like. One, I like that there's more vocal stuff on here. I like that they bookend the project with Joshua Eden, because not only on the opening track does he do a good job at painting just these really vivid pictures over this freestyle improv jazz sounding instrumental with the same sort of free verse slam delivery that I think comes across incredibly well. But on the closer, Black, the stern strongness in his words rings out incredibly well as the drones build up throughout this track. You can really feel his frustration about black culture in the eyes of some, and it's apt. It's definitely apt. You know, just the spin near the end of the track alone of, and this black blazes dance, this black sorrow is dance, these black prayers is dance, this black struggle is dance, this black pain is dance. It's just powerful. It's incredibly powerful. And the droning horns that rise throughout it just give it all that much more power in a great way. But I also like on tracks like For the Culture, they use DEE to almost enhance that island Caribbean style influence. Or the track Hustle, which has a much more standard structure, has these lyrics and this vocal work that enhances the vibe that they're going for incredibly well. I love the groove on Hustle so very much. I like how on Think of Home, another sort of Caribbean influenced track, they instead use accompaniment to enhance that style all the more. You know, my biggest sort of gripe with any of these experiments, especially on parts of Hustle and on one of the other groove-laden tracks to Never Forget the Source, they're low end. For a group trying to really nail this groove down, they don't have much of a backbeat that they're building off of to do so. Sure, the drummer gets in the fucking pocket because they've got a great drummer in their hands. I feel like those tracks in particular would benefit, and maybe even Think of Home could use with some more accompaniment to enhance the vibe, but I feel like those grooves need a little more in the foundation to just get things grooving. You know what I mean? I really like those songs, and I feel like they're still great points to sort of spread out the pacing of the record in a gratifying way. I won't lie, they do leave me wanting more. You know, while that's not as much of an issue on the propulsive tracks, because in those tracks, man, everybody's getting their time to shine on those tracks, man. When they really pull it back or slow it down, it left me wanting a little more. Not in a way that completely pulls it back as far as like scoring is concerned. I still love this thing a hell of a lot, and I feel like the messaging is still as powerful as it was on Your Queen as a Reptile, if not a little more, because they're doing more to expand and, you know, to celebrate black culture in different ways. And I really appreciate that. And I really like this record for what it's trying to do. I still think that the production is aces. I still think the group itself is still a tight batch of musicians. And I feel like if you still really like jazz music, Black to the Future is still a great showcasing of this band's strengths in so many different ways. And I'm loving it. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. I think it's a really great record. And those are the records I checked out this month. Did you like what I had to say about them? Are you upset I didn't talk about a record that you want me to talk about? Let me know what you thought about these records or what you want me to cover in the comments down below. If you did like this review, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general notary content, be sure to subscribe. Special thanks to my patrons. If you want to join their ranks to get early access content, exclusive content, or to help drive the community, it's linked in the description along with the listening log. If you want to see what I have covered in the past, as if this is your first time checking out one of these videos and you want to see what I've covered before you request something in the comments, it's listed down there. It's linked down there. But I'm going to go. I've been Avow Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.